The 1952 Kamchatka tsunami, a forgotten Soviet tragedy. It was 4 a.m. on November 5, 1952. The city of Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky was violently shaken awake by a powerful earthquake. People were thrown out of bed, ceilings cracked, plaster crumbled from the walls, dishes crashed to the floor. Sleepy and confused, residents stumbled out into the streets, only to feel the earth trembling beneath their feet for nearly 5 more minutes. And then, silence. But far out in the Pacific Ocean, something terrifying had just begun. At the epicenter of the earthquake, deep beneath the seafloor, a colossal wall of water had started to form. A tsunami. And it was heading straight for the Kamchatka Peninsula and the Kuril Islands. This wasn't just any tremor. Modern seismologists estimate the earthquake's magnitude to be at least 8.5, possibly as high as 9.0. It released more energy than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima by several orders of magnitude. It took only 30 minutes. With unimaginable speed, the wave approached the coast. It struck with apocalyptic force, swallowing villages, military outposts, boats, and even entire towns. One of them was Severo. No warning, no time. At the time, the Soviet Union had no tsunami warning system. There were no sirens, no coordinated evacuation plans, no public drills. Even radios, if people had them, stayed mostly silent. Ironically, a Japanese-built staircase, constructed before World War II for tsunami evacuation, still stood on one of the local hills. But most residents didn't know what it was for. Moments after the initial earthquake, people in Severo were still trying to collect themselves. Earthquakes were nothing new in these regions. Many had grown used to the occasional tremors. The weather was strangely calm, clear skies, a full moon, unseasonably warm for early November. Reassured, many residents returned to their homes. They had no idea that they were living the final peaceful minutes of their lives. The first wave. At that very moment, the head of the town's police department, a man named Deryabin, had left his house to check on prisoners held in the local jail. He noticed cracks forming in the ground, and the building itself appeared dangerously damaged by the quake. A decision was being made about where to move the detainees when an eerie, low rumble rolled in from the direction of the sea. Then they saw it. A black wall of water, towering above the coast, was rushing toward them. Deryabin shouted, "A wave is coming!" and ordered officers to fire their weapons into the air to alert the townspeople. Together, they ran uphill toward higher ground, toward the safety of the hills, the Sopkas. All across Severo, people began pouring out of their homes in panic. Many were still in their nightclothes, barefoot, stumbling in confusion. The wave, estimated to be over 10 meters, 33 feet tall, struck the town with unstoppable power. Wooden homes shattered like matchsticks. Streets became rivers. Families were swept away in an instant. One survivor, decades later, recalled, "It sounded like 100 trains all crashing at once. I didn't see the water, I just heard it coming. I ran." And then, just as quickly as it had come, the water receded. But it took everything with it. Houses, cars, livestock, people. False hope. Those who had made it to the hills looked down in horror. Their entire town gone. In the moonlight, the exposed seabed gleamed with wet rocks and scattered debris. A deadly stillness settled over the land. Some survivors, desperate to check on loved ones, began descending back into the ruins of the town. They didn't know a second, far deadlier wave was on the way. Roughly 20 minutes later, the second wave arrived. This one was even larger, over 15 meters high and even more violent. It crashed onto the shores of Paramushir Island, striking Severo with unimaginable force. The wave split into two. One branch tore through the northeastern part of the island, destroying everything in its path. The other barreled into the already devastated town. Automobiles, buildings, and people were tossed together in a massive whirlpool. The waves slammed into the seaport, tearing apart ships and flinging them inland like toys. It was this second wave that completely obliterated Severo. There were hundreds of victims. Some were never found. Fishermen from neighboring islands later reported finding human remains and personal belongings washed ashore over 100 kilometers away. The third wave arrived soon after, weaker, but devastating, in its own right. It pushed debris further inland and sealed the town's fate. By morning, Severo had been erased from the map. Aftermath and chaos. Only a handful of buildings, those located higher up, remained standing. Across the land, there was nothing but broken wood, twisted metal, and the floating possessions of lost lives. Soon reconnaissance planes circled overhead, photographing the ruins. Emergency vessels attempted to reach the shore, but debris, nets, and wreckage clogged the waters. Soviet soldiers and rescue teams were deployed. They found people wandering barefoot among the wreckage, many of them children who had lost their parents. Some doctors had to perform surgeries in tents under freezing winds without anesthetics. And yet, in the midst of this unimaginable tragedy, some saw opportunity. Looters in uniform. Official reports, kept secret for decades, revealed an ugly truth. Some Soviet soldiers, including officers, took advantage of the disaster to loot stores and warehouses. They scavenged alcohol from the ruins, vodka, cognac, even medical ethanol, and got drunk while the bodies of the dead floated around them. One military unit found a safe at a destroyed fish processing plant. It contained 280,000 rubles, a small fortune at the time. The safe was broken open, the money stolen. Another group found a postal vault, cracked it open, stuffed the money into a sack, and attempted to flee. They were caught and handed over to a military prosecutor. In yet another case, a senior lieutenant ordered his men to collect bags of grain and barrels of cooking oil from the wrecked supply deposits and bring them back to base for personal use. Yes, some tried to save lives. Others were only interested in saving whatever they could grab. A nation that looked away. Back in Moscow, the day after the tsunami, there was no mention of the tragedy. Instead, the Soviet capital was busy celebrating the anniversary of the October Revolution. Stalin himself stood on the tribune as military parades rolled through Red Square. Newspapers across the country printed glowing articles, praising workers, glorifying socialism, and said nothing about the thousands who had just died in the Far East. The disaster was instantly classified as top secret. The public would not learn about it for years. Foreign ships, including some American fishing vessels, reported massive waves in the Pacific, but Soviet authorities issued no comment. Only decades later would the full truth come to light. A city rebuilt in the same danger zone. Severo was eventually rebuilt, this time on higher ground. But even then, basic safety considerations were ignored. The new city was still vulnerable, especially to mud flows from Ebeko, one of the region's most active volcanoes. The 1952 tsunami had proven that neither the population nor the authorities were prepared. People hadn't been educated on how to respond, warning systems didn't exist. Even the Japanese staircases, built decades earlier by the previous inhabitants to escape waves, were misunderstood by the locals. It took the near-total destruction of a city for the Soviet Union to begin developing a proper tsunami warning system. Today, a functional alert system and civil defense drills exist across the region, but only after the price was paid in blood. Legacy of the wave. Today, the tragedy of Severo remains one of the deadliest natural disasters in Soviet history. It claimed an estimated 2,300 lives, a number that could have been much higher had Deryabin and others not reacted so quickly. Thousands of lives were lost, entire communities vanished, and for years, the rest of the country never even knew about it. In terms of sheer power, The 1952 tsunami ranks alongside the worst in recorded history, including the 2004 Indian Ocean disaster and the 2011 tsunami that struck Fukushima. A wave came in the night and took everything. And then it was buried in silence. Please don't forget to subscribe or write a comment and put a bell so as not to miss new videos. Thanks for watching.